The Red Sea has become, in the years since the Houthi campaign began, the most dangerous stretch of water for commercial shipping on the planet. That is not hyperbole. It is the assessment of every major maritime insurance underwriter, every shipping company that has rerouted its vessels around the Cape of Good Hope rather than accept the risk of transit, every naval analyst who has tracked the pace and sophistication of attacks in this corridor since the first salvos were fired in the name of solidarity with Gaza in late 2023. The Houthis, formerly the Ansarullah movement operating out of territory they control in northwestern Yemen, armed, trained, and directed in significant part by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, had transformed the southern Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait into an operational testing ground for Iranian precision weapons doctrine. Ballistic missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, loitering munitions, one-way attack drones. Each category of weapon had been employed, each had produced lessons, and each had been refined through operational feedback that Iran received from its Houthi partners on the ground and incorporated into its broader maritime weapons development program. The United States Navy was in the Red Sea because it had to be, not because any American strategist would have chosen to deploy destroyers into a confined water body with complex terrain on both shores, poor acoustic conditions for submarine defense, and a threat architecture that combined ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drone swarms in salvos designed to saturate any point defense system through volume rather than sophistication. But the alternative, abandoning freedom of navigation in a waterway through which a significant portion of global trade had historically flowed, was strategically unacceptable. So the destroyers were there, their crews standing watches in conditions that the surface warfare community had not trained for extensively since the tanker war of the 1980s, adapting in real time to a threat environment that was evolving faster than any peacetime exercise program could prepare for. It was a Wednesday. The time was 2:19 local. The Red Sea at this hour was flat, the air hot and dense despite the darkness, a thin moon providing just enough light to define the horizon without illuminating the water surface in any operationally useful way. An Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer was operating approximately 70 nautical miles north of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, conducting an independent presence patrol in support of Operation Prosperity Guardian. The multinational naval task force assembled to defend commercial shipping in the Red Sea. She had been on station for 9 days. Her crew had conducted 5 intercept operations in those 9 days, 2 ballistic missile engagements, 1 cruise missile intercept, 2 drone swarm events. They were not new to this. The pace of the threat environment had produced, in 9 days, more live air defense employment than most destroyer crews experienced in an entire deployment to a benign theater. But tonight was different in one specific way. The intelligence picture, compiled from collection across multiple sources over the preceding 18 hours, assessed with high confidence that a coordinated multi-axis drone attack was being planned, not the improvised salvos of the early campaign, but a deliberate doctrine-driven strike employing the Iranian-designed Shahed 136 and the modified Shahed 238 in a mixed swarm configuration that had been observed in Iranian IRGC training footage and assessed as designed specifically to defeat the layered point defense of an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. The Shahed 136, in its baseline configuration, was a relatively slow, loitering munition, propeller-driven, with a distinctive delta wing profile and a warhead sufficient to cause significant damage to a commercial vessel. Against a warship, the baseline variant was less threatening. Its speed made it detectable and trackable by the destroyer's SPY-1D radar at ranges that provided comfortable engagement timelines. And its warhead, while not trivial, was sized for a different target set. But the Shahed 238, Iran's jet-powered derivative of the same platform, was a different calculation. It flew at subsonic jet speed, fast enough to compress engagement timelines significantly, fast enough to make the terminal phase of an intercept more demanding than the slower baseline variant, and configured in the intelligence assessment to carry a shaped charge warhead specifically optimized for penetrating ship hulls rather than targeting superstructure. A mixed swarm, slower Shaheds saturating the radar track and fire control capacity, faster Shahed 238 Aijao threading through the engagement envelope behind them, was a tactic designed by people who had studied the Arleigh Burke's defensive architecture with the same care that the Navy had applied to studying their attack doctrine. In the destroyer's Combat Information Center, the watch had been at heightened readiness since the intelligence summary had been briefed at 2000. The crew was on modified condition 3 watch standing. More personnel at key stations, shorter rotations, the kind of sustained high readiness that extracts a cost in fatigue, but is the correct posture when the intelligence picture says the next attack may come tonight. The SPY-1D radar was running in its full air search configuration. The CIWS Phalanx system was in autosave. The SeaRAM launcher was fully loaded. The 5-inch gun crew was manned. The ESM suite was working every frequency band simultaneously. At 2:23, the threat picture began to develop. The SPY-1D detected the first contacts at a range of 31 nautical miles, bearing 140 southeast from the direction of the Yemeni coast. The initial tracks were small, radar cross-sections consistent with slow-speed aerial drones, altitude low, between 50 and 150 meters above the sea surface. Low altitude was tactically deliberate. It reduced the detection range at which the radar could acquire the contacts, compressed the engagement timeline and used the sea surface clutter to mask the approach until relatively close range. 7 contacts initially, then 11. Then, as the radar's track processing resolved the swarm's internal spacing, 14. The watch officer's voice was controlled. Captain CIC, 14 aerial contacts, bearing 140, range 31 miles, low altitude, classification drone swarm. Request your presence. The captain arrived in 2 minutes. She had been in her sea cabin, the small cabin adjacent to the bridge that commanding officers occupy during high-threat operations, never more than 90 seconds from the CIC. She looked at the air picture, absorbing the contact count, the bearing, the altitude, the speed. The initial speed assessment from the track data was coming in at approximately 190 kilometers per hour, consistent with the baseline Shahed 136 configuration, but the track count was still refining. 14 visible contacts. The intelligence assessment had suggested a mixed swarm. The faster Shahed 238S, if they were present, would be following a different profile. Lower altitude, possibly masking behind the slower contacts until within the inner engagement zone. ESM, what are we picking up on the bearing? Multiple uplink frequencies, ma'am. Satellite relay consistent with Iranian ground control handoffs. Data link pattern suggests coordinated salvo management from a shore-based operator network. Coordinated, not autonomous. A human operator network managing the swarm's approach from shore with satellite uplink providing continuous guidance corrections. That meant the attack could be modified in flight. Contacts could be redirected. Timing could be adjusted. The swarm's geometry could be reconfigured in response to the defender's emissions and maneuvers. It was a more sophisticated threat than the earliest Houthi drone attacks, which had relied on simpler pre-programmed flight profiles with minimal real-time command. "Log everything," the captain said. "Every uplink frequency, every data link pattern. EA-18G status, no organic electronic warfare asset, ma'am. Nearest EA-18G is 40 minutes out from the carrier group." 40 minutes. The swarm would be in terminal engagement range within 8 to 10 minutes. Electronic warfare was not going to be the primary tool tonight. The primary tools were the ones that had been loaded, maintained, and exercised for exactly this moment. "On all stations," Captain speaking. "Air threat inbound. Bearing 140, 14 contacts, assessed drone swarm. Set condition 1 anti-air. CIWS to auto-engage on my order. SeaRAM is free to engage at parameters. All personnel not at watch stations clear weather decks immediately." The ship came to condition 1 in 91 seconds. Every air defense system was active. Every station was manned. Every weapons crew was at their position. At sea, distance is language. And 31 miles of Red Sea night was now speaking in the radar cross-sections of 14 objects moving toward the ship at 190 kilometers per hour. At 2:27, the contact count updated. 17. 3 additional contacts had appeared, separated slightly from the main body of the swarm, approaching on a bearing 2 degrees south of the primary group. A lateral offset that placed them on a slightly different arrival azimuth, a geometry consistent with a multi-axis final approach designed to force the ship's point defense to engage threats from slightly different directions simultaneously. Standard multi-axis coordination expected. The tactical response was also standard. The ship was already beginning its defensive turn. A course change to place the bow toward the primary threat axis, maximizing the forward firing arcs of the SeaRAM and 5-inch gun, while presenting the narrowest possible cross-section to the incoming contacts. The 5-inch gun crew engaged the first contact at 2:31, at a range of 11 nautical miles. The engagement was a burst fire solution against the lead element of the swarm, a track that the fire control system had designated as the highest priority contact based on its bearing relative to the ship's course and its predicted arrival geometry. The first round was fired at 2:31:14. The second and third rounds followed within seconds. The fire control system tracked the impact. The contact's radar return disappeared from the SPY-1D display at 2:31:41. First kill. 27 seconds of engagement time. from first shot to confirmed kill. In the CIC, the Air Warfare Coordinator updated the track count. 16 remaining. The SeaRAM system engaged autonomously at 0232. Its fire control radar, acquiring and tracking a contact that had separated from the swarm body and was approaching on the starboard quarter, the lateral offset element, attempting to arrive from a slightly different bearing. While the primary engagement was focused forward, the SeaRAM's rolling airframe missile left the launcher at 2:32:08 and intercepted the contact at 2:32:19 at a range of approximately 4.5 nautical miles, 11 seconds. The contact's radar return was replaced by an expanding debris cloud that the SPY-1D tracked briefly before losing it in the sea surface clutter. 2 kills in 65 seconds, 14 remaining. At 2:33, the track data produced the information that the captain had been waiting for and expecting. Among the 14 remaining contacts, 4 tracks had increased speed significantly, from 190 to approximately 700 kilometers per hour. The Shahed 238 ES. They had been flying in the body of the slower swarm, their faster speed profile masked by the radar track clutter of the surrounding contacts. At 700 kilometers per hour, they were inbound on a timeline that was measured in seconds rather than minutes. Range, 9 nautical miles. Time to impact, approximately 46 seconds. La CIWS to auto-engage, the captain ordered. The 2 Phalanx systems activated simultaneously, their tracking radars acquiring contacts and their 20mm Gatling guns spinning up to their 6,000 round per minute fire rate. The Phalanx is a last resort system. Its effective engagement envelope is measured in hundreds of meters rather than miles, its purpose being to destroy anything that has survived the outer and middle layers of defense before it can reach the hull. Against a 700 kilometer per hour contact at 9 miles, the Phalanx had approximately 20 seconds of effective engagement window as the contact closed to within its fire solution range. The SeaRAM engaged one of the 4 fast contacts at 2:33:41, a clean intercept at 6 miles. The 5-inch gun engaged a second at 2:33:58. The Phalanx opened fire on a third at 2:34:12. Its streams of 20mm tungsten rounds meeting the contact at approximately 800 meters range. 3 of the 4 fast contacts were destroyed within the engagement sequence. The 4th, Shahed 238, was not. It impacted the destroyer's starboard side at frame 147 at 2:34:29. The shaped charge warhead penetrated the hull at the waterline and detonated inside the engineering spaces. The blast killed 2 members of the engineering watch team and wounded 5 others. It ruptured a fuel line that fed the starboard gas turbine generator, producing a fire that the damage control teams would fight for the next 47 minutes. It opened a hull breach that admitted approximately 400 gallons of seawater per minute before the emergency shoring crew got bulkhead patches in place at 03:22. The ship did not sink. The damage control organization trained, drilled, exercised, and led with the kind of institutional discipline that the Navy has refined since the fire aboard the USS Forrestal in 1967, performed exactly as it had been designed to perform. The fire was contained. The flooding was controlled. The hull integrity was maintained. The ship was hurt, but the ship was alive. While the damage control teams were fighting the fire, the air defense engagement continued. Of the 13 remaining slower contacts, 8 were destroyed by the SeaRAM and 5-inch gun over the following 4 minutes. The remaining 5, perhaps responding to the loss of their fast companions and the degradation they were observing in the ship's electronic emissions. The damage had affected some secondary systems, apparently received a redirect command from their shore operators, and began orbiting rather than continuing their approach. The orbiting contacts were tracked by the Spy-1D throughout, their uplink frequencies continuing to be collected by the ESM suite. At 2:41, the captain transmitted the first OPREP, operational report, to 5th Fleet and NAVCENT. Ship damaged. Hull breach controlled. Fire under control. 2 KIA, 5 WIA. Air defense engagement ongoing. She did not, in that transmission, communicate anything that the SPY-1D was not still tracking, and that the damage control teams were not still fighting. The report was factual, precise, and transmitted within 12 minutes of the impact. The 5 orbiting contacts were engaged by a P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft that arrived on station at 0307, directed by the destroyer's CIC. The P-8's Harpoon missiles destroyed all 5 remaining contacts between 0309 and 0314. The air picture cleared at 3:15. The fire was declared under control at 3:51. The hull breach shoring was confirmed effective at 3:22. The destroyer was proceeding under her own power at reduced speed by 4:30, course north, toward the task force operating area, where a repair assessment team would come aboard at first light. In the CIC, the captain stood at the tactical display at 4:45, 2 hours and 22 minutes after the first contacts had appeared on the SPY-1D. She looked at the cleared air picture. She looked at the status board that showed her ship's systems, some nominal, some degraded, some offline pending assessment. She looked at the damage control log that had been running continuously since the impact, its entries time-stamped to the second. She looked at the watch officer. Full reconstruction, every track from initial acquisition to final intercept, every round fired, 5-inch SeaRAM Phalanx with timestamp and outcome, every ESM capture of the uplink network, the impact data, frame, depth of penetration, blast assessment, all of it. I want the package to 5th Fleet, NWDC, and the Naval Warfare Development Command within 3 hours. She paused. The NWDC package specifically, I want them to have the Shahed 238 speed profiles, the approach geometry, and the swarm masking technique. Every piece of data about how they use the slow contacts to hide the fast ones. That is the lesson. That goes to every destroyer commanding officer in this theater. She looked around the CIC, faces that had been running an air defense engagement for the past 90 minutes, followed by watching their ship take a hit and continuing to fight, tired, some of them showing the strain of the past 2 hours in the set of their jaws, and the steadiness with which they were forcing themselves to maintain the routine. 2 sailors did not come home from this watch, she said. That is the weight of what we do. The damage control teams and the air defense teams did everything right. We destroyed 16 of 17 inbound contacts. The one we did not destroy was faster than we had the timeline for. That is the data. That is what changes the next engagement for the next ship." She paused. "Write the report. Make it complete. The 2 sailors who died tonight, the most important thing we can do for them now is make sure the lessons of tonight reach every ship in this fleet." She left the CIC at 4:51 and went forward to the damage control scene to speak with the teams that had fought the fire. What had occurred in the Red Sea on this Wednesday morning was not the kind of event that either side would characterize as a victory without qualification. The attacking force, Iran's weapons, operated through Houthi proxies, guided by a shore-based operator network, had achieved 1 hull hit out of 17 attacking contacts. That was a 5.9% penetration rate against a fully alerted, fully engaged, highly capable air defense platform. By the mathematics of attrition warfare, it was a poor result for the attacker. By the mathematics of what a shaped charge warhead can do when it finds a hull, it was a result that cost 2 lives and required a damage control battle that lasted 90 minutes. Modern naval air defense in the drone age is not the clean, reliable process that peacetime exercises suggest. It is a continuous, exhausting, probabilistic contest between attacking systems designed to defeat point defenses by volume and velocity, and defending systems that must engage correctly every single time. While the attacking system needs to succeed only once, every engagement produces data. Every hit produces lessons. Every lesson, if captured correctly and transmitted quickly to the fleet, makes the next engagement marginally more survivable. That is how the Navy improves under fire, not by avoiding the fight. The destroyers are in the Red Sea because they must be. Because freedom of navigation is not negotiable. Because the alternative to presence is the abandonment of a principle that the entire international maritime order depends on. But by treating every engagement, including the ones where the ship takes a hit, as a data point in a continuous learning process, that is the operational foundation of institutional survival. The Red Sea does not forgive inattention. It does not reward complacency. It rewards preparation, discipline, and the willingness to learn from what happens when everything goes right. And the one contact that gets through changes the watch forever. The destroyer continued north at reduced speed. The damage control log was complete. The report was being written